Hi, welcome to the Craft Sanctuary. My name is Yarrow. I'm a queer maker living in Scotland, and I'm hosting this podcast to explore making as healing, landscape as belonging, and grief as a door. I also host a creative community that you can join on a pay-what-you-can basis. We meet weekly for cozy creative co-working sessions and have a supportive space on Mighty Networks. You can find the link in the show notes, and if you have a second, I would also really appreciate a review. Thank you so much. I'm sending love to you and your making practice. Hi everyone, my name is Yarrow and you're listening to the Craft Sanctuary podcast because, ta-da, there's a new name. This is the second time I'm changing the name of my podcast, and in this episode I want to tell you more about why, what's next for the podcast, what's happening in my personal life, and just what I'm planning at the moment. So I'm recording this in October 2022. October and autumn in general is really my favorite season of the year, and this year especially it feels like such a homecoming and really, really good. There's just so much to be cozy about and to process, I think. That's where I'm at. I'm still kind of in recovery from my accident, almost 2 years later. Adjusting to life with chronic pain and more limited mobility. And I've been living in my new home since March this year. I moved houses because I needed to be on the ground floor, and I'm really engaged in nesting and gathering nice foods for winter, having candles around, getting cozy, and thinking about ways in which I want to be social again with people in person, because obviously there's not been all that much of that, and I still feel like I'm in a process of thinking about what risks I want to take, what I want to bring back into my life after this period of hibernations and lockdowns and hospital stays. And I think as part of that, in the last few years, making has been so important. And of course, I've always been a maker in some way, and I think the podcast in some ways also has always been about creative practice in different ways. And so if you're new here, I'll just tell you a brief overview of how this came to be. I started podcasting in 2015. That's quite some time. This is episode number 150. It was initially called Daydream Rolls, and then for about 2 years it was called Creative Nature. I have had a Patreon also for almost 5 years, and in the beginning I was offering patrons monthly ritual kits. So I was really deep in the practice of each month coming up with a theme and then sharing tarot spreads and herbal recipes and journaling prompts and playlists and recorded massage and writing and movement practices. And many of these practices are still available to Patreons. They've just gone into an archive and people dip into them as and when they want to. And I think in the beginning, in the first few years, in the very beginning, I thought it was just going to be a solo podcast. I just wanted to experiment with a different format. Having been a blogger for many years, I felt like a bit stale maybe in that practice of writing and sharing in that way. And so I just wanted to sit down, hit record, and talk about things in my life. And I then began starting to talk to my friends as interview guests, and I enjoyed that so much that I slowly but surely over the years broadened the scope and invited more people in, and people asked if they could be on the show, and I got to share their stories and their work and their visions. And I'm truly feeling so lucky that I get to do this work, because I'm quite an introvert. I really enjoy deeper conversations, and I think that the podcast has really given me the space to talk to people in a meaningful way. And I would say in the first 3 or 4 years, the podcast was really broad in scope. I was speaking to people who have healing practices. I always spoke to writers, to herbalists, to activists, to artists, to all kinds of people. And I think a common thread was just a curiosity, I guess, about life and what it means to be human and what it means to stay alive in these times. And then shifting the name to Creative Nature, I think the focus shifted a little bit more to creative practice, but I still, I think, have a habit of kind of wanting to be everything to everyone, and that's human. It's fun. I love my communities. I just want to offer them as much as I possibly can. But I also, I think for myself, have really this desire to kind of hone in and to focus on the things that are most important to me in my practice, while also keeping some things to myself. I feel like there's a real like, it can be easy to feel like we should monetize all our hobbies or share everything about our lives. And I think it's okay to choose containers for our work and things that we want to focus on. And so, anyway, I think to me at this point in my life, what really feels still the most important thing is to think about practice that's creative and nurturing, about small everyday rituals, thinking and making space for grief, honesty, relationships, those kinds of things. And within that, of course, different threads pull together, such as working with plants, thinking about home, thinking about food, thinking about the seasons and that rhythm. But I want to really more specifically in this space talk about making practice and creativity and how that has really carried me through the last 2 years. And I'm excited both to share more about my own practice, about what I'm making and why, and how I'm kind of finding my place in the world between arts and crafts. I think there's a lot to flesh out there. A lot of people like me feel really hesitant about describing themselves as an artist or a maker. And I would love to talk more about that. But I also want to talk to other people about their practices and what makes them feel alive and creative and engaged and having a sense of meaning making. And I think there's so many beautiful things we can talk about, and I listen to all kinds of podcasts myself, but what feels, again, most important to me right now is also having space for grief and loss and reflecting on the pandemic and the things we've experienced and the things maybe that in some ways have been traumatic. And that's not to be a downer. I think there's a real sense of joy for me in that exploration because it just feels so honest, and it feels like the more I talk about these things, the less they burden me, the more they allow me space for pleasure and freedom and liberation. But I think talking to my guests about their making practice and their creativity is maybe a really nice and gentle and contained way to also talk about those more difficult things in life. So I don't want to get people on the show and be like, hey, like, what have you last been crying about? I mean, unless that's what they want to. But I can see myself asking questions along the lines of like, what's giving you comfort? What's keeping your hand busy right now? How are you processing your experiences? So to me, making is a beautiful way to articulate loss sometimes and to think about the more feral aspects of life, if that makes sense. A good friend of mine died last December very unexpectedly, which was a really big wave of grief for me. And especially in the beginning, I felt this real sense of being almost like an animal, like I was just sleeping and eating and moving in this very kind of intuitive, feral way, because nothing really mattered outside of this big loss that was so consuming. And that was hard, but I remember in a few days after my friend died, I began to crochet for the first time ever. And I was just sitting in bed, staying home alone for Christmas. I was going to spend Christmas with this friend. And I was just crocheting these little circles. And it's not about what these circles are at all, but it was just about keeping this thread to aliveness there and having something in my hands at a time where a quiet meditation practice, for example, really wouldn't have been accessible because my thoughts were spiraling and I was just so sad. Like I couldn't bring myself to really sit in that stillness. I needed to have something in my hands. And I know so many people who really support their mental health through knitting or crochet or weaving or any kind of other making practice. And so yeah, I just can't imagine something more exciting to talk about right now. Another aspect that made me feel like I want to commit to this being a craft sanctuary is this overwhelm around social justice that many people feel. I think we all agree there's so much that could be different in the world. And I know many listeners just, yeah, share this feeling of like, there's so much I want to do. And is it ever good enough? What else could I do? What is the edge of my resources and my capacity? And sometimes, not always, but sometimes making with other people and being these like really basic human things of like, I'm going to make you something to keep you warm. I'm going to cook you something to feed you. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to listen to you. It just kind of brings me back to basics where I'm like, that really does make a difference. And maybe that is enough for now. And I can hold my politics and my visions and my moral compass and be both kind of visionary and really pragmatic right now and see what is right in front of me. So yeah, there's that too. Another thing that motivates me is the Making app. I've shared about that before a few episodes back. It's a lovely app. I really recommend it. I would love to connect with you there. As you know, I left Instagram about 2 years ago for all kinds of reasons, and I feel really encouraged and kind of welcomed into this new space that is run so differently and that's really focused on making and on making a space for every maker. That's that tagline. I've been teaching some classes on there and really enjoyed that. So it feels nice to be able to visually share making processes with people, because I think that's probably one of the good things I got out of being on Instagram is like visual inspiration and being able to share projects and process. And I think for me, in the end, it wasn't worth it anymore. Thinking about the downsides for me personally that came with being on there. So I'm glad that that space exists, and I think that will be a nice way for me to continue sharing and being inspired. I have also, since the summer, been offering Queer Spirit sessions on the first Sunday each month. They're free. I'll link to them. You're welcome to join if you like. It's a space for queer people to meet up and practice in their own way. So we meet for 45 minutes. I open with a grounding. I welcome everyone in. Sometimes I read a little bit, and then we quietly practice in devotion for 20 minutes. And we each do that in our own way. So some people rest, some people draw, paint, or write, look at the sky, or meditate, or draw cards, whatever you feel like. And then at the end, we come together and you can optionally share what came up for you. It's quite experimental. I'm not sharing a whole lot because I feel like this is such a personal topic and I don't want to be in any way kind of imposing my own thoughts of what spirituality is or could be on other people. But I love hearing and I love being together, and sometimes it feels really natural to bring making to that space. And it also makes me think of making as like a real refuge and a touching point in life where I, in my own life, haven't felt like there's a space for me within religious structures that I could embody as my whole self, if that makes sense, and feel really kind of in integrity and also welcome. And so, but I want this space, right? Like I want a space also to think about the big questions in life and feel connected to something bigger than myself. And I think in some ways I found that in making, and that's really precious to me. And I want to explore that some more here. So, yeah, this is my little waffle 13 minutes in about what's changing for the podcast and why, and where I'm at. And I also want to tell you about a few things that will be coming up. So, firstly, I'm currently planning a 5-day creative winter retreat, which I'll offer over on the Making app, and it's going to be over New Year's Eve. So, at the very end of the year to the very beginning of the next year. I'm not a big fan of New Year's Eve. I never have been. I've actually had this accident that I had was on New Year's Eve 2020. And so this year I kind of wanted to stop making myself have fun. I mean, I'll definitely have fun, but not in a conventional way. So I want to offer this 5-day online retreat which I think of as like an artist residency or a writer's retreat or just a break from ordinary life as we go from one year to the next, at least in the Gregorian calendar. And so the format will be that we'll meet for 3 hours each day. The first 45 minutes, I'll give a little workshop on creativity and practice. Then we'll have a 15-minute break, and then we'll have 2 hours of quiet practice together. And we'll hold this really sweet, supportive container of accountability. So I know for me, I would probably, if I didn't have that space, I'll probably watch a lot of crap on Netflix and flop around. And that's really cool too. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I think rest can look like many different things. But I'm really excited to be in that space where I'm really committing to maybe do some printmaking, maybe some more crochet, maybe I'm going to draw or paint or see or write. And I will just know I will show up to my practice in a deeper way in that container with other people. And I'm also really excited to prepare these workshops and really think about where I'm at with creativity and how can we manage to bring more of it into our lives. On the podcast, I will also bring more solo episodes. I have a bunch more episodes already recorded with guests that I really am excited to share. I think 6 at the moment, and I will take a bit of a break from recording new ones because that is really taking a lot more time coordinating, the meetup, doing the recording, editing, recording an intro, and so forth. I love doing it, but I am also back at school studying at the moment, which I'll tell you more about in another episode. So I need to scale back while also really wanting to give this podcast more love and more episodes. And so more of them will be solo. And I really encourage and invite you to email me if you're interested, or if you have a question that you want me to cover. I would like to record more meditations for you. I would maybe like to record little ritual guides or creative projects, and just answer questions and be in dialogue with you as a listener in that way instead of just with my guests. So you can catch me at hello@yarrowdigital.com. I can't promise that I will be able to write back very quickly. It's hard to stay on top of your inbox, but I love hearing from people. And I would love it if you reach out if you wanted to hear me talk about something in particular. And then the last announcement is that my creative community is now meeting twice per week, at least till the winter solstice. So this is for our patrons at all levels. We used to meet every Sunday evening, 8 to 9 p.m. UK time. And the format is always the same. I open with a grounding. I welcome everyone in. People share what they're committing to working on. I draw a card. I share some journaling prompts. And then we quietly work together for about 45 minutes. And it's, again, that's like really gentle weekly accountability. Such a good way to end the week. Because I feel like whatever the week has been like, I always end it feeling like I have been engaged with my practice. I'm still a maker and a creative person, and that's really sweet. And also just seeing other people in their own practice is really beautiful to witness. And it feels low energy, accessible. I can't promise that it's accessible in every way to everyone. That's never the case, but I think people come feeling comfortable being in their pajamas, being off video, not sharing anything, doing something really small, maybe just cooking a meal, but just wanting that company. And I'm really grateful for that. That means a lot to me. And so the announcement is that we're now meeting twice a week. I'm offering a second session on Wednesday evenings from 6:30 to 8 p.m. UK time. So a slightly longer session, same format. And I'm just experimenting with that. I have committed to offering that until the winter solstice, and then I'll reassess if twice a week is really something I can sustainably offer. I know that for myself, I want that continuity and depth of practice at the moment, and I love sharing with others. This is still on a donation basis through Patreon, and I'll link to the show notes to it in the show notes if you want to join. So business-wise, it feels like a bit of a mad thing to do because it's 10 sessions in total I'm offering on a donation basis per month. Twice a week, the creative co-working sessions, and then on the first Monday each month, we have an intention setting sessions, and then the first Sunday each month, there's Queer Spirit. So Queer Spirit is free. Everything else is kind of connected to the Patreon, but it means that in theory, you can, come see me 10 times per month if you want on Zoom. And that might not be for you. There's certainly no expectation to show up every single time. But I think if you are in a space in your life right now where you want that group accountability and a bit of a container and framework around your practice, then that could be a really beautiful thing. And I would love to have you. All right, that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. I'm really grateful for you. And if you could leave a review, that would mean a lot to me as well. But in any case, I love you and I look forward to sharing more soon.